Oh, look at him. Well, good evening, listeners. You're listening to the Lament of Hope uh, podcast. I'm here today with Alissa Czisny, and she is a former competitive figure skater. She still skates, but she competed in the past, and she was actually a U.S. champion in 2009, 2011. Alissa, I wanted to just to kind of start out for people who are not too familiar with your background. Where did you grow up, and how did you develop a love for figure skating?
I grew up in Bowling Green, Ohio, which is a fairly small farm town with a university. And so as a child, I participated in a lot of sports that were available to, I have a twin sister, to the two of us just as community members. So being from a small town, I would not have ordinarily gotten these opportunities, but was figure skating, I was in gymnastics, my parents, taught my sister and I how to play tennis, and my dad played soccer with us. And like, my parents are active people, and my sister and I participated in all the activities. And at some point, my parents sat us down and said, you have to pick a sport if you want to be competitive. So fortunately, we both enjoyed the same sport. And that's how I started in figure skating. And I think it helped that Scott Hamilton, who, I think is a household name, but the 1984 Olympic champion, is from Bowling Green, Ohio, actually.
Oh, wow. Did you as a child, was your childhood marked a lot by sports and activity? Was there anything else that, like when you think of your childhood, that you have very fond memories of?
I think my sister and I were homeschooled by my mom. And so in many ways we got a hands-on school experience because if my mom was teaching us about, you're in one of the first grades and you're learning about the trees, and then we go take a walk, and she would, we would go outside and we'd find leaves from all the trees, like just sort of a hands-on experience in school. And because my parents were active, we were just involved in all the sports. So I think those two things in particular gave me a bit of a unique childhood.
Did you enjoy the homeschooling for the fact of being able to learn at your own time and your own pace kind of thing? Or were you able to kind of absorb into the interests you really enjoyed the most?
For me, I mean, I went to kindergarten, and then from first grade on, my parents decided that they wanted to homeschool us. And so I don't, until college, I didn't know what a real per se school experience was with my peers. So for me, it wasn't a matter of comparison. I didn't know better, and I enjoyed what we had. And I was naturally uh, school came easily to me.
Hmm.
So I may not have enjoyed myself. And I was a quirky little child. So I don't know if I would have enjoyed school as much as the next person.
What made you
And through,
quirky?
sorry,
I was gonna say
I think
maybe.
my, what made me quirky? I think my interests, and just I loved reading. I could go through 30 books a month. And
Oh, wow.
I just, I wasn't inundated with pop culture because we grew up without a television. So I think I just wouldn't have fit in. And as an adult, life is a bit easier than when you're in middle school and high school, I think, because you can find your people and you can
Yeah.
understand how to get along, and you're not made fun of in the same way that you might be in grade school or high school.
What was there a childhood book you loved? If you're reading that many books, like were you reading classics or like series or
Everything that the library offered, I would read. And very quickly in my childhood, it became I was big into historical fiction for a long time, actually, when I was younger. I didn't so much like series books. I wanted to know like what people's lives were like. That was one of my big, and mystery books, Nancy Drew, all that sort of, that was up my alley.
what is there something your parents said to you, like your mom or your dad, that impacted you? It could be like a positive or even a negative thing, that you've kind of kept with you as an adult.
As far as sports or just life,
Whatever stands out first.
I do remember that my sister and I were, I think, 11 or 12 when we started skating up in Detroit area because there was a higher level of skating, higher level training. And we were quite talented for our age. So as 11 and 12-year-olds, we were skating with girls who were in high school. And a lot of times skaters in high school, they start to be like, they get a boyfriend or they decide that they don't want to skate anymore. And a lot of them quit skating at that moment or they stop training for their goals. And I remember my mom telling my sister and me, never quit your career for a boy or for a relationship. And I think that stuck with my sister and me. Like we
Hmm.
knew that taking care of ourselves in that way was more important than giving it up for a relationship because the person who really cares about you won't ask you to give it up.
Mm.
And I think my sister and I both took that to heart in our careers. Neither of us made sacrifices to quit something that we believed in or we loved for someone who didn't believe in it.
Mm. So you're thinking when you're saying that it's more like someone who would ask you, I guess, to give something up for them or to give up interests you had because you weren't spending enough time with them or something like that. Is that what you mean?
Exactly. Yeah. And in high school, or the girls that we were skating with who were in high school, I could see that happening a little bit where their boyfriend's like, you spend all your time at the rink, or am I not important? Or you get different interests because you don't want to lose the boy or something. And so I think my mom saw that and she said that because she did have to give up her career when she had my sister and me because she was taking care of us full time and whatnot. And I think that she didn't want us to make that decision too soon.
How do you, because now, I mean, you're recently married and I don't know what you're thinking family wise, but is that something that you think about or worry about is having to one day not skate at all or to skate really recreationally as opposed to on a bigger scale?
At this point in my career, the skating is limited anyways. Like I won't be skating for that many more years. Just physically, it's not easy to keep up a high level
Hmm.
as a skating career. So, and the older you get, the harder it becomes to feel like what you're giving on the ice is what you want to be giving on the ice.
Hmm.
Especially, I think more so for women than for men. So I'm not really worried about, in a way, giving up my skating career. I haven't had to right now because my husband's a skater and we do shows together and we train together and that has been fantastic. But as far as giving up my skating, it's not really a worry for me because I know that I can skate until I want to stop. And it could be 2 years, it could be 5 years. So I'm, getting to the age where it's a reality to consider stopping.
What do you love that you think, like, are there other hobbies you really enjoy that you might pursue more over time?
It's a really good question because I went to college, got a degree, and have done absolutely nothing with it as far as a job because skating has been my career and coaching skating has also been my career. That sort of simultaneously goes along with professional skating. Um, but I don't know. I don't know. I have some ideas of what I like to do and definitely continuing to coach skating, to teach seminars for skating is in my interest in the future because there's so much I've learned from this sport that I want to give back.
What do you think you've learned from it?
Oh, that's a good question. I think one of the things that I've learned from skating, I think one of the things that skating can teach people is self-confidence, self-esteem, working for something, working for a goal, failing, making mistakes, learning from the mistakes, working hard at something that's not immediately gratified, can
Hmm.
make you feel, can give you confidence in yourself that something comes your way and you're able to work through it and accomplish goals that you want. And I think that is one of the biggest things in life that it can give kids in the sport. It's a life lesson learned, gaining confidence in yourself, in your ability to work, your ability to face obstacles, your ability to do something you thought that wasn't physically possible for you that you've mastered.
I would
And
think,
that's any sport, of course, not just figure skating.
oh yeah. No, but I would think too, like, did you have times of great discouragement? Because I would think that there's the temptation to also quit when you're not reaching that goal in the timetable you mentally have. Um, did you have a time when you really wanted to?
I It's hard for me to say because I grew up in kind of a very insular bit of a world because I was homeschooled and I skating I wanted skating to be my career, not just a hobby or just not something I did until I graduated high school. I had a dream of it becoming a career, but I didn't. Twice I won nationals, and twice and almost three times I failed to qualify for the Olympics when I could have and was physically capable of qualifying to compete at the Olympics. So that's everyone's goal in figure skating. When you start skating, you want to go to the Olympics. And it's something that I failed at twice. And the first time I failed, I didn't consider quitting because I just was like, I have more to learn and I have better to grow. And the second time I failed to make the Olympics, I was just like, well, I'm not good enough, obviously. I won nationals in 2009. I didn't make the Olympics in 2010, considered quitting. And then I decided that I wanted another chance to prove to myself, actually. And at that point in my life, I was making enough money through my career in skating that I could feasibly continue to skate.
Hmm.
But the hard part, I think, for a lot of people in a situation in figure skating is that it costs so much to figure skate that you do get to a point, you graduate from high school or you get to high school. It's like it's hard to financially continue to skate without seeing any benefits.
Hmm.
Very, very few people get to a point in their career where skating becomes a make money version of your hobby.
Yeah.
And it's also one of the few sports that you can professionally continue not competing, but actually just performing in your sport, and it can be a career. So fortunately, I picked this and not gymnastics, which has such a short shelf life. And I've been able to continue it. So those two moments, and then the third time I wanted to try to make the Olympics, I ended up having hip surgery twice in the 2 years prior. And so that time I ended up quitting because not because I was discouraged, but because I wasn't physically capable anymore and I knew it. And so that's when I decided to turn my career professional and just to perform in shows, which has been not something I regret at all.
How did you feel about that, when you came to the realization that physically, because you're young, but I mean this happens a lot to athletes, especially because you're using your body a lot all the time. Um, how did that feel, kind of realizing, okay, well, my body is in some ways telling me can't keep going further on this. But you seem like a very driven person. So how did you kind of reconcile that for yourself?
It was hard. And believe me, my identity was slightly wrapped up in my skating, and as many people at that level are, you are as good as your skating results are. And it's hard not to look at life outside of that. So when
Hmm.
you know that you're not physically that person anymore, you have a bit of an identity crisis. And for me, and like I said, in a way, I was fortunate because I could continue to be that person professionally skating.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't as bad because I'm not like changing careers and starting over, going back to, graduate school and trying to figure out who else I want to be in my life. So while that transition was hard, um, I wasn't physically incapable of skating at all or performing. So I'm very thankful for that. But I think it's for a lot of people, no matter if you win the Olympics, you turn around and you have to become a different person because
Hmm.
your identity is not skating, and you don't wake up every day and I know what I want to do, and I'm driving myself to get to this goal. So and maybe it's rampant in all sports, but it's that transition from sports life to real life, it can be very, very hard.
How did you kind of cope with that now? Because you said it's interesting because you've transitioned to the professional, which you love and are good at. But there's definitely not the competitive side of it and everything. Do you enjoy the professional aspect more than the competitive, or um, like how do you see a gain in doing something a little different than when you fought?
I mean, for the biggest part, the professional is you're not judged. There's not a panel of judges sitting there and saying you're the best or you're not the best. You come in, you do your job, you get a paycheck, people stand up and applaud for you, and you leave. I mean, you're judged, of course, if you don't if you don't perform well or you're not up to par, you might not get hired for the next show. But in general, like I'm paid to entertain and perform for an audience. They're not really sitting there judging me. They want to be entertained. They want to be inspired. They want to come to a show and feel better about themselves. And you're giving them an outlet for perhaps their emotions through your skating. And so it's inspired me to do all of those things for the audience and not. I feel like competitive world can be very self-serving. Whereas in the professional world, when we're
Hmm.
performing, it is giving back or giving the audience an outlet for their feelings.
Is there a type of, is there an emotion that you find easiest to display when you're figure skating?
That's a good question. I know one of the hardest things to do is to entertain and to amuse, because the audience is there and um, my husband is very good at making them laugh when he's skating. And it's so hard because each audience is different and each audience is willing to laugh at a different joke, for example. But in order to make them laugh at a joke that's put on the ice with your skates, or the music or whatever it is, I think that is actually one of the hardest things to do in skating. Like being a comedian if you're a serious actor.
Yeah. Do you prefer those or do you prefer the more serious
I
type?
prefer the more serious, the a bit introverted, more like angsty sort of slow music. It's my natural tendency to be that way, but also to skate in that manner. So for me, doing something slower and more emotional is definitely up my alley more than being funny and making the audience laugh.
Do you remember a time when your joke kind of fell flat on the ice and you were like, you had a kind of moment of,
I haven't actually tried to amuse the audience in that way so much. Last year, 2022, I had a program that was not exactly meant to be funny, but it was meant to be fun. And so there were jokes in the there were some not necessarily jokes, but I was able to create a program where I commented. It was a demonstration of spins. And I've always been known for being a great spinner. And so I was the demonstrator, but I was also the person commentating the demonstration. So I was talking to myself, which naturally lent itself to some jokes. And in the moment when the audience laughs is really fun. And that was something I hadn't experienced before because I had never really tried. And I can see how it becomes addicting to be a comedian. I'm just not good at it though.
what, you were mentioning identity a little earlier. What do you have your identity in now? Do you think it's different
I
than when
think
you were younger?
for sure. I mean, it's hard. It's really hard in competitive sports as a child when the people around you are wrapped up in your results. Your parents are putting out the money for your results. I mean, your parents are putting out money for your training because they know it makes you happy and whatnot. But it's hard in a hyper competitive atmosphere not to have your identity wrapped up in your results. It's fine to have, part of your identity being I'm a skater, I'm a competitive skater, I love skating, I'm good at skating. But for your identity to be wrapped up in what your last result was is something I find more and more in youth sports, and I think it's dangerous. And I was at the top of my game, and it's hard not to have your identity wrapped up in that because you are proud of your
Yeah.
work, you're proud of your accomplishments, you know what you've gone through to be to get to where you are. And so when you are not capable of that anymore, or you choose to move on for whatever matter, whether physically you're not capable or you're moving on with life, to realize that your identity has nothing to do with your results whatsoever. It's who you are as a person. It's what you enjoy doing. It's what you give back to others with what you enjoy doing. I think it's a lot of other things. So for me, to realize that I'm not good enough to win nationals anymore was hard because I was proud of myself for what I had been able to accomplish. When you grow up thinking like, oh, I'm never going to be that good, and then you do everything that it takes to get there, and you're like, now I can't. who am I? Am I any good?
What do you find most beautiful about life now in the season you're in?
Relationships. For me, I was as a competitive athlete and someone who was homeschooled and didn't have a lot of friends, and my family's not social, and I didn't go to school and meet friends, and I, wasn't around that many people. I didn't have relationships, didn't have friend relationships, didn't have, boyfriend relationship. I didn't know how to be around people. And now as an adult, as someone making my own decisions about who I hang out with, to me, it's really important. And also for me as a skater, my friends are in all places over the world. Like I don't have friends in the city I live in. Like most people, I have friends around the world. So keeping those relationships intact and taking time to continue those relationships to me is really important.
What is really hard right now? What do you find really difficult about life?
My life has been this is not a bad thing because I'm enjoying it. My life is an adventure. But I went from living on my own for 10 years by myself. Life was very quiet. I went to the rink, I taught, I went off and skated someplace for perform. And now every day is different and there's always things happening. And I'm not the most spontaneous person, but I desire to be a spontaneous person. And right now, the way my life is like every day is different. You walk in, oh, there's an interview happening over here, and there's people visiting now, and I really love that. But for me to lose the control of what happens every day was hard.
Yeah.
Not in a bad way because I have desired that. It's just that it's different. It's very different from what I lived, the last 10 years of my life where I made all the decisions myself.
What do you find it scary, just the spontaneity of things that to get used to, or is it more of you don't feel prepared? What is the aspect of it that makes you more?
It's I think you hit the nail on the head with the preparation because I spent my life preparing, like I would not go, you don't go to a competition unprepared. You don't show up at a show unprepared. You don't come to an interview unprepared because things are planned, you know what you want. So you plan to get there, but life is not, you don't get to prepare for life in the same way. And so it's realizing also that you don't have to be perfect. Like you can walk in and your friend is there, and if your house isn't clean, they probably don't care. I mean, they're not eating off your floor. There's no one, like it's okay. But I grew up in an environment where you didn't walk out of the house unless it was perfect. Nobody came over because our house was too small. And so for me to realize that those things are okay has been the biggest
Yeah.
step. Or to, like I said, like, people come over, we have no food, we'll figure it out together. So it is, you're right, it's the preparation and letting go of control.
Yeah. No, that's hard. That's hard for me too. Um, what is there a certain person or um in your life or someone more in a public spotlight that you really look up to?
Actually, that's a good question. I think the answer to one of those is my husband, because like I said about life and spontaneity, he's one of the best people at that. But it's the way he approaches life. When he has a job, he's well prepared. He doesn't go to the rink every day at the same time, spend the same amount of time on the ice. But I see him do the work behind the things that he does, and in what it looks like he comes in and it's all off the top of his head, but there's a lot of preparation. But to me, with him, is it's how he treats everybody. We go to the grocery store and he tries to make the person scanning the food smile, and this person that we meet in the street, someone recognizes him. Like, it's for him, he makes time in his day for
Mm.
everybody, no matter who it is, and he tries to put a smile on their face. And I think that to remember that every single day, not that I'm not that way, but I'm not outgoing. And so for me, I might smile at somebody, but that's it. But I really admire that ability to like look outside yourself and your own problems, and try to make whoever comes across your path in life, to make them smile. It's sometimes the littlest things that make the biggest impacts that we forget.
Is there something you want to do that you haven't done yet?
I think there's a lot of things. One of my dreams was to help bring skating to countries that don't have skating.
Hmm.
Because for me, it's not so much, I mean, I say this having gotten results in skating, but for me, it's not about the results that skating brings. It's about the ability to express yourself, your feelings on the ice, or to have a community of people who enjoy the same thing that you do,
Hmm.
or to just have an outlet. And so, skating is a European, Asian, and American sport, or North American sport. And I have a friend from Argentina, and she and I have, well, I mean, she has been big in trying to help bring skating to South America. But I got the chance to be with her a few times and just to introduce the joy of this sport to people who don't have that or don't have the opportunities. That's one of my dreams is to help move the sport to a wider audience of participants.
Is it more, do they not have figure skating in as much
Yeah.
in South American stuff because of what specifically causes it to not happen? Is it the environment, like the or
Yeah, for sure. I mean, keeping ice in an environment that's warmer is way more expensive.
right?
People don't have the disposable income to come to an ice rink to spend, money to do skating. And they're just, yeah, it doesn't have the history of the sport, whereas Europe and America especially had the history of skating because they skated outdoors on frozen lakes and ponds.
Right.
So I think it's accessibility, but it's also just interest. And now that's starting to expand a little bit more in Southeast Asia, Australia. Australia has a pretty good skating community,
Hmm.
but just there's Africa has almost nothing. They have
Yeah.
some South African federation, but I don't think most of Africa doesn't have the stability to do extracurricular activities like figure skating right now.
Yeah.
So it's a global economy, it's a global stability, but I think having a dream of helping bring that to more of the world is a part of all of that.
Yeah, for sure. Um, Two more questions for you. One, do you remember a performance that emotionally impacted you, um, personally?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think. Sorry, the dog is barking at somebody. Um, I think I remember growing up idolizing Scott Hamilton because he was from my hometown, but also Scott was one of the first performers that instead of performing for an audience, he entertained and amused them. And still to this day, he doesn't perform anymore, but he speaks and he knows how to make each person feel seen. And I remember how much of an impact that had on my skating. I was the complete opposite. I'm like very shy and I don't want to be in front of people. But now, as a skater, especially the last couple of years of my skating, I realize that watching a performance, as a spectator watching a performance, the performance can inspire you, it can move you, it can give you an outlet for your emotions, even if you're not the one performing.
Yeah.
I've gotten to this point and I forgot the question. Oh no, so it's not so much one performance, but I was on a tour last fall or this spring, and all of us skaters geeked out and we were sharing. This is my favorite performance. This is my favorite performance, and it's not so much one performance for me. It's how the performer made me feel that inspires me because I want to do the same for other. It's that magic of like a live performance when you go to watch a concert or something. You come home inspired, and it's not a tangible reason, but I think figure skating can be that for the audience or for other skaters.
How about for you personally, like a performance you did?
Oh, that's a good question. I created a performance last year. I was obsessed with the song, the version of Chasing Cars by Tommy Prophet and Flurry. Just I was obsessed with the song on my playlist. Like, you know what? I have time this summer. I should just make up something for no reason at all. It wasn't for performance. It was just for me personally, how I felt while listening to the song. Really loved it. Then I actually decided to to perform it because I liked what I created. And then I was performing and I got injured, had to take the jump out, realized that jumping or not jumping, the jump didn't make the performance better. I felt like the performance took people on a journey. And it was really cool to perform across Canada and the US. And we did meet and greets after all the shows. And the amount of people that came to your meet and greet were like, your performance moved me. And even if it like you didn't have any jumps and I loved it. And it was just like, I really felt like the performance made people feel. And I was really happy because of that, because I didn't create the performance for a show, in particular, or I didn't try to put movements in the performance that were like, oh, here, look at me. It was more about how it made people, how it made me feel. And to be able to share that with the audience was special because it was so personal.
Yeah, I know, because when I saw the performance, it seemed like you really were feeling it. I think that's why it was so compelling, is that you weren't really it. I don't want to say you weren't entertaining, but that wasn't the purpose of it. So it was kind
Yeah.
of people were getting to see a moment with you. It wasn't so much you trying to do something for other people, kind
Yeah.
of. Um, and then just one last question. How would you encourage someone who is kind of transitioning out of anybody who's kind of transitioning? I don't want to say completely out, but athletics are becoming less dominant in their life because of an injury or something that there's just come this point where they do have to let go perhaps of the harder grip they've had on athletics. How would you encourage them, as it sounds like even for you, I mean, this is still something you're doing yourself and journeying on. How would you encourage them in that?
It's a good question, and it's I think a very relevant question. But for me, I think one of the biggest things, we were talking about identity, and in sports, and especially in competitive sports, our identity gets wrapped up in our results, and you start
Yeah.
to think that you're not as good of a person because you're not as good of an athlete, or your results are not, you're not giving good results, or something in your life means you're not a good person, and we have to stop thinking, as a culture, we have to stop thinking that. But I think that it's important to be proud of how much you've accomplished in your athletic career, because none of that has gone to waste, and that all has made you the person you are today, which will only make you a better person in the future. And I don't think most athletes are not afraid of starting again at ground zero. That's not the fear. It's, choosing another career. You start at the bottom, but all athletes know that that's where you start, and you work to get to where you want to be. I think the biggest fear for athletes is finding something that they have the same passion for.
Yeah.
And that's not something that can be found right away. And I think society in general, and people surrounding us as athletes, expect that we're going to excel at whatever we choose, which is not wrong, but no one can choose that quickly and no one can excel that quickly. So we have to
Hmm.
be willing to be in a place where you're not necessarily working for your lifelong goal,
Yeah.
and you're willing to like try something and fail, or try something and not like it and try something else. And we're just so used to like, this is what I want, I know how to get there, and I'm willing to work for 5, 10, 15 years to get there. We all know that we can do that. So, but finding what that is we have to realize, I think, that it takes time. And you know what? We may never find another passion that we want to pursue as much as our sport. And that's, I think, the hardest thing to accept. But, once you're out of the sport a little bit longer, you understand that there's a balance to life. And it's really fun when you enjoy that life balance. Like, there's family, there's relationships, there's fun, there's pleasure, there's work, there's all these different things that we, as competitive athletes, you don't have a balance.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, listeners. Again, you've been listening to Alissa Czisny, former US champion, and it was some really encouraging topics. She talked about identity in sports, as well as what her life's looking like now, moving away a little bit more from the competitive sphere. But thank you so much. It was really a gift to talk with you.
Thanks for having me.